Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to just make some prefatory remarks. We're about to begin the preliminary hearing, State of Ohio versus Jermaine Ruth. Now, each of you have been admitted to the room. You're aware that you've been through a security screening. There is a level of decorum that is expected of each one of us as we proceed in this matter. Please, no photography, no recording. Stay in your seats. Comments, any disruptions will be appropriately addressed by the court and the security staff. So again, you're welcome to be here, but it is expected that you not do anything that would interfere with the course of the proceedings. Mr. Franklin, we're not yet on the record. The state is ready to proceed.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, now the bailiff is marking exhibits. You've supplied all the state's exhibits to the bailiff?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Mack, do you have any exhibits that you anticipate using?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. I believe as soon as Mr. Cato is done marking those exhibits, we'll be ready to start.
Your Honor.
Yes.
We're here for two matters, and we did merge them together.
That's right.
I'm going to waive one of those so that.
Do you have the waiver form?
No, I don't.
I'm assuming it's the drug charge you'll be waiving?
Yes,
All right, so we'll get started. I'll let the clerk know to prepare that waiver form. We're now on the record, State of Ohio versus Jermaine Ruth. There are two matters. One is 14 CRA 1262. This is a preliminary hearing that is scheduled for the trafficking drugs charge 50-degree felony. Also before the court is case 14 CRA 1356 AB, also styled State of Ohio versus Jermaine Ruth. This matter is set for preliminary hearing as well. Mr. Ruth is present. Attorney Jimmy Mack is present on his behalf. Attorney Michael Franklin is present on behalf of the State of Ohio. Before we went on the record, Mr. Mack, you advised the court that you anticipate waiving the preliminary hearing concerning the trafficking charge. Is that correct?
That is correct, Your Honor.
Okay, I will instruct the clerk's office to prepare the waiver form concerning that charge. We will resolve that matter at the conclusion of the first matter. Okay. So is the state ready to proceed in the primary matter, 14 CRA 1356 A and B?
Yes, Your Honor.
And Mr. Mack, did you consent, sir?
Yes, I am.
The state wish any opening statement?
No, Your Honor, we would waive opening statement.
Mr. Mack, do you wish to make any opening or any remarks?
We will waive an opening statement as well, Your
The
Honor.
state calls first witness.
Your Honor, as a preliminary matter, may I ask that the court instruct that lay witnesses not be photographed or videotaped on the stand?
I will make that instruction for purposes of the preliminary hearing to any photographers, any of the members of the media that are here today. This is not a trial, it's a preliminary proceeding. Our process contemplates that this filtering stage takes place. Whether or not Mr. Ruth is indicted on the charges remains to be seen, so I'd ask that you abide by that rule. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Your Honor, we would call Patrolman Spencer Gale to the stand.
Admonish those present that they're to keep their comments to themselves, to not in any way or any fashion disrupt these proceedings. Any such disruption will result potentially in your removal from the courtroom. Please observe this admonishment. Thank you.
Now, is it fair to say that well, first of all, to locate this a little bit, is it fair to say that Fern Avenue runs generally in a northerly, southerly direction?
Yes.
So there would be an east lane of travel and a west lane of travel, or a northbound and a southbound lane of travel?
That's correct.
All right. With those references in mind, where were the shell casings found? Were they on the street, in the sidewalk, on the tree lawn? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, according to the diagram that I'm looking at, and the numbers that are depicted, they're not indicative of a bullet per se. It's just in the way that the evidence was collected. Items, shell casings 1 and 2 are in the street on Fern Avenue. 3, 4, and 5 are on the tree lawn, close to the sidewalk. And 6, 7, 8, and 9 are in the area of the sidewalk and the residence of 4708 Fern Avenue.
The rifle you indicated that is commonly chambered for the 7.62 round, the AK-47, does that eject from the left or the right side?
The right side.
Now, were you able, or were the investigators able to determine anything about the direction in which the shots were being fired through the course of the investigation?
Yes.
And how did that come about, please?
In the days subsequent to the shooting death of Mr. McCurdy, we were contacted employee or owner, I'm not sure, as I sit here, of a business called Los Compadres Restaurant, situated at the intersection of West Avenue and West 47. That subject informed us that there was a bullet hole in the front window of the building, and Lieutenant Dibble contacted Special Agent McNeely with PCI's crime scene processing lab, and she and him together proceeded to Los Compadres and determined that 3 additional impact sites from a large caliber rifle, large caliber bullet had occurred. And using technology that I'm not sure about, but Special Agent McNeely explained
That you have become acquainted with Mr. Ruth before this event.
Objection, Your Honor, it's not relevant to whether or not this action took place and whether or not there's probable cause that Mr. Ruth is the person in this particular case. I see no relevance.
Mr. Franklin?
Your Honor, we're establishing a couple of things here. First of all, the basis of the witness's ability to identify the defendant. And secondly, we are leading to an identification of a vehicle which will be relevant to this later testimony.
Your Honor, we will agree that he knows the defendant, so that's not a question, okay? And as far as anything else, I think, Your Honor, that's under Rule 442, 443. I think that's not relevant at this particular time.
That's the identification, that stipulation will be noted, and then Mr. Franklin, as to the other purpose, the identification of the vehicle, just proceed directly to that issue.
Very well. Detective Feld, prior to this event, were you aware of, or had you had occasion to observe vehicles driven by Mr. Ruth?
yes.
What vehicle did he most often occupy in your experience and in your observation?
A silver Trailblazer that's registered to Jenna Ball.
Have you ever known anyone else, in your experience as an Ashtabula police officer, to be operating that vehicle other than Mr. Jermaine?
No.
In connection with your investigation of this matter, and especially the shooting scene, did you review any security video from any area businesses?
Yes.
And specifically, did you review the security video at the Los Compadres restaurant? Corporate limits of the city of Ashtabula, is that correct?
It is.
And the location where the shell casings were found at is also a location within the corporate limits of the city of Ashtabula, is that correct?
It is.
I have nothing further at this point.
Thank you. Mr. Reed, or Mr. Mann?
Thank you. Detective Feld, before we get started, you indicated that you reviewed 2 videos, is that correct?
Yes.
And either of those videos, did you see Mr. Ruth fire any weapons?
No.
And any of those vehicles, did you see whether or not Mr. McCurdy fired any weapons?
No.
Now, you received when did you start your initial investigation of this scene with Mr. McCurdy? When did you start?
I came in around my normal start time in the morning and learned that there was a shooting death during the nighttime hours. It was briefed by Lieutenant Dibble. So my investigation technically would have begun around 7 or 8 in the morning when I showed up for work.
So it would have been approximately 6 hours or so after the shooting, is that correct?
It is.
Now, at the time that you started your investigation, had you received any police reports?
Nothing had been generated as of that time.
Nothing had been generated, no reports and so forth. Now, do you know whether or not Mr. McCurdy's hands were bagged on that particular night?
I do not.
Now, you said that you had approximately 400 hours of crime scene investigation, and then you mentioned something else. Is it not regulation that you would bag or fire a weapon?
It is a common practice, yes.
And did it come to your attention any reason why no one on the scene on that particular night bagged their hands?
I wasn't at work. I didn't know what happened until I came back in the morning.
Well, you started your investigation that morning. Now, the person was still at the, where was he? Which hospital?
I'm sorry.
McCurdy. Which hospital was he taken?
The Ashtabula County Medical Center.
Okay, and his body was then transferred to the Cuyahoga Medical Coroner's Office, is that correct?
It is.
And you were the lead detective on this particular case, is that right?
I was the lead detective when I started this.
Yeah. Did you at any time ask the coroner in Cuyahoga County to bag or test for gunshot residue, stickling, or anything of that sort?
Yes.
Did you receive a report back?
I have not received any reports back.
You have not received any reports back. Now, the automobile is ultimately discovered at West 34th Street, is that correct?
Yes.
Would that be consistent with where any alleged gunfire would have taken place?
I'm not familiar with what locations where other shot fire calls were received.
Right. So we can't say where any shooting took place. Now, we do know that there were two persons at West 34th Street when the initial officer arrived at the scene, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, did they tell you whether or not they had moved the vehicle?
My understanding is the vehicle could not be moved. It was rendered inoperable because of the deployment of the airbags.
Okay, so now, but the person had been moved from the front seat to the back seat, is that, or do we know whether or not the person was even out of the car at the time of the shooting?
I'm going to object, that wasn't even the testimony. I'm not quite sure what the basis is.
I believe the testimony was he was out of the car in a truck.
Okay, what I'm trying to figure out is, when two persons, you did read the statement of some witnesses, is that correct? And your
Yes.
patrol officer. Where was Mr. McCurdy initially when the first officer arrived on the
He
scene?
was, to some degree, not to some degree, he was either fully loaded into the backseat of a silver truck, or he was hanging out of the truck, and his two friends were trying to get him to the hospital, is my understanding.
Okay, so he had been removed from the truck that he was allegedly in, that's my question.
He was removed from the white car.
Right, removed from the white car.
Yes.
And did they tell you how long they had been there at the scene before they removed him from the vehicle?
It would have been under a minute. Again, they have 4 blocks. They observed Mr. Logan and Mr. Cunningham both recognized Mr. McCurdy's vehicle to be Mr. McCurdy's vehicle. They, by their accounts, they told me that they knew something was wrong. Obviously, they had a flat tire. He wasn't stopping at you.
Okay, so if a person were outside of the vehicle and got into the vehicle, then you can't say whether he was shot outside and got in the vehicle or not, is that correct?
We can't actually, and the blood spatter that's alongside the vehicle indicates the vehicle was in motion at the time the blood left the victim and went down the driver's side of the vehicle.
And that is redacted, and who made that determination, sir?
Special Agent McNeil.
Okay, and that is written up in the police report?
It's submitted in her report, yes.
And you indicated there were 2 shots through the front windshield? Is that
Yes.
correct? And you said some along the driver's side?
That's correct.
Now, you did not see Mr. Ruth in any verbal altercation with this Mr. McCurdy in the bar, is that correct?
Correct.
And and you indicated that he had a discussion with someone by the name of Mr. Jackson.
Yes.
So there's nothing here to indicate that Mr. Ruth had anything or any altercation with Mr. McCurdy on this particular night, from the videos that you saw.
That's correct.
Now, you indicated that you saw Mr. Vaughn or Trayvon Jackson outside in the parking lot after the talk with Mr. Ruth inside the bar? They were out in the parking lot? Any of the vehicles indicate when Mr. McCurdy's vehicle appeared after there was this discussion between Mr. Jackson and Mr. Ruth outside?
It's paired up with the witness testimony and the timestamp on the video. Again, I don't have those still photos here in front of me to look at to tell you exactly what time it is.
Now, by the way, Mr. McCurdy had a cell phone, isn't that correct?
I believe he had 2.
He had 2 cell phones. And did you have those in evidence as well?
We do.
Now, did you subpoena the records of Mr. McCurdy's?
Yes.
Okay. And did you find Mr. Ruth's name or number on any of those telephone calls?
Every telephone that we've submitted requests for records or search warrants for records, we're still awaiting those returns from the appropriate subscriber information providers.
Okay. So then, as far as this day, you don't see any conversation from Mr. Ruth again, just for the day, were here between Mr. Ruth and Mr. McCurdy?
I don't have any records at all for anybody yet.
No bullets, because you have 9 that were found there at the scene. Nothing to tie those bullets to Mr. Ruth.
I have independent witness interviews that have done it. Does connect Mr. Ruth to the victim McCurdy.
To the victim McCurdy.
Yes.
And who would those witnesses be?
I'd have to refer to my notes to be able to give you the number of people that have all said essentially the same thing.
And when did you take those statements?
Those interviews have been, been taken since July 25th, yesterday afternoon, and the case is still being investigated.
And any of those witnesses with Mr. Ruth at the scene?
Yes.
Car in which Mr. McCurdy was initially found is locked up in the Sally Court here at the, or was here at the Municipal Justice Center, is that right?
Yes.
Looking at the photos that have been marked in front of you, do they fairly and accurately depict the appearance of the car when it was brought here?
It does, yes.
You also indicated in response to Mr. Mack's question that the pistol that was found in the car was a semi-automatic. It had a clip in it, and I believe you testified the clip was loaded, is that right?
It does have ammunition, yes.
There's no round in the chamber.
That's correct.
Now, in the typical, do you carry a semi-automatic pistol as part of your everyday duties?
Yes.
Detective? And have you been trained in its operation?
Yes.
Are you familiar with its operation?
Yes.
Typically, when a semi-automatic pistol is fired with a loaded clip inserted, the action will cycle and reload the chamber, is that right?
Yes.
I have nothing further.
Just to be perfectly clear on that last question, you found no round in the chamber, is that correct?
That's correct.
Anything further, Mr. Mayor?
Nothing like
Thank you, Officer Pelican. Accept that.
Your Honor, very briefly, we have shown that within the territorial jurisdiction of this court, Devonte McCurdy was shot and killed at the dividing point between July 24th and July 25th. He appears to have been still alive on July 25th, so we charged the crime as having occurred on the date he died, the 25th. It's apparent he was shot in the chest. It's apparent that the car he was riding in was basically shot to pieces with a high-powered rifle. The shell casings found at 47th and Fern are consistent with such a rifle. The location of the shell casings and the spent rounds in Los Compadres restaurant indicate that the shooter was on the street laying in wait for Mr. McCurdy when the shots were fired. We have testimony from a lay witness that Mr. Ruth had some issues with Mr. McCurdy over the alleged theft of some drugs. And from that same witness, we have an identification of Mr. Ruth's voice uttering in Amber Stevenson's home in an excited fashion minutes after the shooting that he had just either shot at or that he had killed Wong, also known as Mr. That was Mr. McCurdy's street name or nickname. Under those circumstances, we believe we have shown that it is reasonable and probable to believe, and it is shown by substantial credible evidence, that Jermaine Ruth did, with prior calculation and design, purposefully caused the death of Devonte McCurdy, that he did so through the means of a firearm. And we ask that the court accordingly bind these cases over to the Ashtabula County Grand Jury for further proceedings.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Your Honor. Please, on the court, Your Honor, the testimony, as far as I believe that's come in, there are two counts here. If one is aggravated murder with a prior calculation and design, and then the other one is knowingly caused death of Mr. McCurdy. Your Honor, when you look at the elements of each of these particular crimes, and especially the one with aggravated murder, I don't think that there is any evidence that's been produced by the state or the city or anyone to indicate that there is any prior calculation or design. There is no witness that has come forth saying that my client went somewhere and sat down and came up with any reason that he is going to shoot this person on this night of July the 24th and or July the 25th of 2014. As a matter of fact, there is no one there who has indicated that they saw Mr. Ruth with any weapon on that particular night of July the 25th, early morning, July 25th. No AK-47 that's been connected with Mr. Ruth at this particular time, Your Honor. We know that there are no videos that will indicate who, if anyone, shot Mr. McCurdy on that particular night. There is nothing to tie this man to it. Now, Your Honor, that whether or not you want to believe in Stillman or not on this particular case, and I know it's probable cause, and that you are to weigh this favorably as far as the city or the state is concerned. I don't believe that they at least did not show that there is any prior calculation design, because one, you don't see on the night of the 24th of July or early morning of July the 25th, there is no argument, there is no evidence of any arguments between Mr. McCurdy and Mr. Ruth. So there's no motive, no intent there. Again, you don't even see Mr. McCurdy out in the parking lot when Mr. Ruth is out in the parking lot, leaving the parking lot. And if that is a normal exit out of the parking lot, out onto the street, that's all that they have shown that happened on this particular night. Therefore, I say that the aggravated murder charge, they have not met any of those charges. Secondly, Your Honor, they still have not even met the elements of whether or not he purposely caused this man's death on the night of July the 24th and or July the 25th. No evidence, no weapon, no witnesses, nothing but what they heard somebody say. Again, Your Honor, they have to show this, and I don't think they've met any of these particular elements, and I suggest, Your Honor, that this honorable court would dismiss the charges against Mr. Ruth, and that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Franklin, final word?
Your Honor, there is, of course, the testimony of U.S. Marshal Bill Bolden, who indicates that a person identifying himself as Jermaine Ruth called him and essentially confessed that he had shot Mr. McCurdy. He just claimed he had done it in self-defense. Self-defense is, of course, an affirmative defense that the defendant would have to sustain the burden on. If that testimony alone is believed, Your Honor, we have probable cause for murder, and it becomes the province of the grand jury and the court of common pleas to determine whether or not the self-defense argument can be sustained by evidence. We also have other video that Mr. Mack did refer to, the video at Los Compadres restaurant, where we see a car, at least resembling Mr. Ruth's car, circling through the parking lot shortly before the time the shots are fired that actually strike that restaurant. I would urge that there's probable cause to believe that Mr. Ruth was in the area and that he was looking for someone. Thank you, Your Honor.
Your Honor,
Go ahead.
Your Honor, I guess even if you wanted to take Mr. Franklin's argument that you are to weigh whether or not my client said that he shot the person in self-defense, Your Honor, then I think then the charges should be amended down to voluntary manslaughter, Your Honor, because if you want to believe that, if they wanted to go forward on it, voluntary manslaughter would be more appropriate. Voluntary manslaughter is that when a murder is brought on by serious provocation of the victim. Again, purpose, aggravated murder and murder are not the appropriate charges. If they want to go back, if they want to charge for voluntary manslaughter or involuntary manslaughter, those are more appropriate than murder and aggravated murder based on the evidence that's got forward today.
I think I'll begin the court's analysis just where the parties have left off in their argument. We have Mr. Ruth himself indicating to the officer that he acknowledged firing the weapon. He asserted in that conversation he did it in self-defense. Now, certainly, the fact finder, whether it be a judge or a jury, is free to accept all or a portion of any witness's testimony. It is the ultimate function of the fact finder to determine what statement is worthy of belief and what's not worthy of belief. Now, in this case, I have a firearm that was located in the vehicle of the decedent. It was a semi-automatic firearm. From the testimony of Detective Felt, for that weapon to be fired, or were to have been fired, because of its very nature, because of its very function, there would have been a round in the chamber. There was no round found in the chamber. Therefore, the court finds the greater weight, the greater evidence here is that this is, if there was in fact a self-defense issue here, it's, as Mr. Franklin notes, that is an affirmative defense. That's something that must be proven by defense. It's not something that the state has to anticipate or disprove. So based on the evidence, I'm finding probable cause exists for both charges. I will bind both matters over to the county police court for further proceedings before the county's grand jury. The bond previously set will be continued. Anything further from the state?
No, thank you.
Mr. Mack?
Nothing.
Good luck, folks. Yes, it's been signed. Mr. Ruth, concerning the drug trafficking case, you understand by signing this document, you're eliminating the requirement that a hearing be held in that matter. And this is your signature, sir? Yes. I'm signing as the judge of the court, and as the person who is attesting to your signature. That matter we now go over to
Jury, that was.
Mr. Franklin?
Solemnly swear the testimony about in this case before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Yes.
Sir, would you please state your full name and spell your last name for the record?
Thomas Despenis Jr., last name is Despenes.
Mr. Despenis, what is your current occupation?
Investigator with the Ashtabula County Coroner's Office.
How long have you held that position?
I've been there almost a year now.
And what did you, and on July 25th of this year, did you have occasion to come into contact with a person, a deceased person by the name of Devonte McCurdy?
Yes, I did.
Could you tell the court, please, how that happened, what you did, and what you stopped with?
I was called by the ER personnel at Ashtabula Medical Center. They called to report a death of a subject that suffered a gunshot wound.
Kelly Stone? Number you're right.
Thank you.
Your Honor, at this point, the state will call Kelly Stone.
Solemnly swear the testimony about in this case before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. You may proceed.
Now, ma'am, could you just, for the record, tell us your full name?
Kelly Marie Stone.
So, in the course of your knowing Mr. Ruth and knowing Mr. McCurdy, did you have an occasion recently to talk with Mr. Ruth or listen to Mr. Ruth on the subject of Mr. McCurdy?
Yes.
Can you tell the court, please, when and where that would have taken place?
Objection, Your Honor.
In her house, talking about,
Well, you heard a voice other than Amber's, and it was a male or female voice.
I mean,
And did you recognize it? And who was the man speaking?
Jermaine Ruth.
Could you hear anything that Jermaine was saying? What did Jermaine say?
It was kind of shocking. I don't know exact words, but it was like, I just shot at them.
Objection, Your Honor. She doesn't know its exact words. I'm objecting.
She can give her best recollection. All rule in her cases. Your best recollection.
It was, I shot at that bitch ass nigga once, or I bodied the bitch nigga once. It was
I
like,
body him? What did you understand by the phrase body?
killed.
And I'm sorry, Your Honor, I'm hearing some remarks from